go around and describe some characteristics of the person that you respect and what he or she did to gain your respect. We'll start with you, Gary, if you have someone.
A person that I respect.
Yeah.
What they did.
Yeah.
I always had a strong respect for Pastor Spearing.
Okay.
He kind of reminded me of my own father.
Okay.
I felt he would be a good father figure.
Well, that's good.
Judy, who would you respect?
I respected my father also.
Your father.
He was just a little man. He was about my height and everything, and built like me. But when he talked, you listened. And he didn't have to, I don't know, he just had a commanding way about him. And he, one day, I'll never forget it, I don't even know how old I was, I think I was in my teens. This woman came out the road, and she had homemade blankets made out of ribbon or something. You know how they did the braided carpets then? I don't mean blankets, I mean carpets. She was carrying homemade carpets that she had made. And my dad bought one off of her. So he came in the house and he said to my mom, here's this carpet. She said, what did you buy that for? She said, I have so many carpets. She said, I don't need that. Well, he said, that's one less she'd have to carry.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Norma, do you have anyone that you respect?
Well, I had a home ec teacher in school, Miss Rink, and she was like a mother to the whole bunch of us girls.
They'll carry it.
She used to take us to farm show, and that one day she had a two-tone blue Pontiac, and we were going down the road, and we all had decided to have to go to the bathroom, so she lets us out. We couldn't even hardly walk. It was so icy. And here she was trucking down the road with all of us. But she always was very, very good. She was like a mother to all us girls.
Well, that's good. Maureen?
Mine would have to be Gary's dad, Gerald. He was always so kind, and he always showed kindness and never would speak bad of anyone or about anyone. He was a terrific example of the way you should be.
Good. Karen?
Mine was my Sunday school teacher when I was in elementary school, Jessica Kopatz, down in Rushville. And just the way she did the lessons and gave us all a chance to participate and respected everyone, and we felt the same way about her.
Okay. Pauline?
I think the person that I met up here 5-6 years ago, she's a pastor. Her name is Susie Burchell. And before I met her and went to celebrate recovery, she brought, she has Bible studies at her house Monday nights, and she's had them for years. And I've been going for years, and I really respect her, and she makes me think more about God than I ever did before in my life.
Good.
And Celebrate Recovery itself, I love that place.
Absolutely. Ruth Ann, do you have anybody?
I would say my mother-in-law, Gertie.
Okay.
She is a very mild-mannered person.
She seemed like it when I met her.
And, whenever she was asked if she could watch the kids when they were little, they ran around in the barn with her. And of course, Emmett and Gertie both took care of the kids while I was in the hospital for 79 days. So, but, like I said, she's just calm. She seems calm, and she just was always there if you needed her.
Mine were my two grandfathers, both for different reasons. My mom's father was very quiet. Never spoke a whole lot of words. Didn't talk a whole lot of people, but his actions spoke more than his words. He was involved in the community very heavily, did Lions, even got the Goodfellow Award with the Lions and everything else, and they honored him at his funeral. And he was very well respected because he would do everything he could for anybody he could, but he wouldn't talk about it. He wouldn't discuss it, wouldn't yell at us. And I can't ever remember a time that he even spoke up against my brother and I when we were being bad. He would just calmly say to us, that's not how you're supposed to do things. Now, my Grandpa Weaver was the opposite. He was very loud, very brash, and I respected him because of what he had faced in World War II in the Pacific. And I knew that if I messed up, I was going to pay from his hand, and he would make sure that I knew it. Our cousins, we had 11 of us at the time, all for the most part got a good beating from him on several occasions. But it was because he didn't want us to continually be bad and do the things that we were doing. And I respect my father as well. He didn't have a great character growing up, and we got a lot of trouble with him and stuff. But his work ethic was beyond anything I'd ever seen. And he would go to work sick and cold and everything else just to make sure that we had a roof over our head and everything else. Worked in a coal mine for 35 years and literally just beat himself to death so that we wouldn't have to want for anything. And that's the main reason that I still respect my dad, and even though he can't get around much because of the coal mine. But it's good to hear the people that you guys respect and you look up to and how much of an impact that they had on your lives. So this is for some personal reflection. What are some characteristics in your life for which your friends might respect you? And I'll just take volunteers for this. We won't go all the way around the table. Does anybody want to say what are some characteristics that you have that might make your friends respect you?
Closeness with my family.
Closeness with your family? Okay.
I have people say I'm always smiling.
Always smiling?
Well, I'm just assuming everybody here, they always volunteer for things, so people realize that you would give your time and energy if they needed it.
I think mine would be that if I'm going to do something, I usually do it unless I forget, and that happens. But for the most part, I'm pretty accurate. I'll tell you the truth and won't give you a runaround about it. I think that's what I would be respected for. Now, how about disrespecting? What would your friends say about you for disrespecting? I know mine personally would be my anger, which in a lot of times in my bad years got me in a lot of trouble because I had a real short fuse. But with Christ on my side, I've been able to keep the angry man in the box, as my dad says it. But I believe most of my friends would say my anger. Anybody else? What would you guys be disrespected for?
I'm always late.
You're always late.
Not as late as I am.
I was later than you.
But I'm always late.
And you just live across.
Is there anybody else who want to share what they'd be
You're down
disrespected
the
for?
road.
Nothing? Okay.
My dad calling me was pokey.
So we all have a problem with being on time and punctual, huh?
Well, I'd probably be early.
Too early.
Always early.
Well, that's why
Same with me.
I don't know, when I was at home with all the family, I was the oldest one of the bunch, and it seemed like I was the last one helping Mom get them out the door. And then Dad always called me Pokey.
Well, good. As we read Esther, this first chapter, King Xerxes made a habit of throwing lavish parties and celebrations. And this particular celebration sets the scene for many of the events in the book of Esther. Conflict, plots, and schemes, bravery, and deliverance. So we are going to read Esther. I would ask that we take a couple sentences and just go around the table and go until we read all the way through it. And I may stop you here and there to give you some footnotes or tell you an interesting fact. Who would like to start?
I will.
Okay, Judy?
Now it came to pass in the days of
King Xerxes.
That's
Xerxes?
Xerxes.
That's what it says.
That's how it's said.
This was a Xerxes which reigned from India even into Ethiopia, over 120 provinces. That in those days, when the king Xerxes sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in
Shusha.
the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces being before him.
Okay. Just a side note, the story begins roughly 483 BC. It's 103 years after Nebuchadnezzar had taken the Jews into captivity. It's 54 years after Zerubbabel led the first group of exiles back to Jerusalem, and 25 years before Uzzah led the second group to Jerusalem. Esther lived in the kingdom of Persia, the dominant kingdom in the Middle East, after Babylon's fall in 539 BC. Esther's parents must have been among those exiles who chose not to return to Jerusalem, even though Cyrus, the Persian king, had issued a decree allowing them to do so. The Jewish exiles had great freedom in Persia, and many remained because they had established themselves there or were fearful of the dangerous journey back to their homeland. It's also interesting to note that Xerxes the Great was Persia's 5th king from 486 to 465 BC. He was proud and impulsive, as we see from the events in this chapter. His winter palace was in Susa, where he held the banquet described in chapter 1, verse 3 through 7. Persian kings often held great banquets before going to war, and in 481, Xerxes launched an attack against Greece. After his fleet won a great victory at Thermopylae, he was defeated at Salamis in 480 and had to return to Persia. Esther became queen sometime in 479.
Is that how she became an orphan? Her parents left and didn't take her?
It doesn't say. So it's either her parents had gotten killed or something had happened, and her uncle Mordecai had basically raised her up because he felt that it was his duty to do so. Lorna, if you'd like to take a couple sentences.
For 480 days he displayed the wealth in his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of
Porphyry,
marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberty. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished.
Okay. Can you imagine that? Drink all that you want, right? You know, and it was a celebration that lasted 180 days, about 6 months. Its real purpose was for planning the next battle and to demonstrate the king had sufficient wealth to carry it out. And waging war was not only for survival, but it was a means of acquiring more wealth, territory, and power. And we have to remember that Persia was a world power. And the king, as the center of that power, was one of the wealthiest people in the world. Persian kings loved to flaunt their wealth, even wearing precious gemstones in their beards. Jewelry was a sign of rank for Persian men. Even soldiers wore a great amount of gold into battle. Go ahead, Maureen.
How would they keep them in their beard?
They probably put them on rings. They do beard rings. They probably put jewels or tied them in. I wasn't there, so that's my best guess.
You were.
No, I wasn't.
Oh, I get all the good words. Okay.
It's Queen Vashti.
Is it
Vashti, either way.
Also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, which belonged to King
Xerxes.
Okay. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Xerxes, to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown, in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command brought by his eunuchs. Therefore the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner toward all who knew law and justice.
No, go ahead, Karen. You can take the next couple.
Is that number 14?
Yeah. Say it as best as you can.
The names of these men were Karshina,
Yep.
Shethar,
Yep.
Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marcina, and Memucan,
Yeah.
several nobles of Persia and Media. They met with the king regularly and held the highest positions in the empire. What must be done to Queen Vashti?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
The king demanded. What penalty does the law provide for a queen who refuses to obey the king's orders properly sent through his
Eunuchs.
eunuchs? What are they?
That's where a gentleman who serves the king has their parts cut off, so they can't start their own dynasty and undermine the king, and they usually watch over the king's women or serve on a noble position. Yeah, it's kind of gruesome, huh?
Memucan answered the king and his nobles. Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but also every noble and citizen throughout your empire. Women everywhere will begin to despise their husbands when they learn that Queen Vashti has refused to appear before the king.
Yep. Go ahead, Pauline. 18.
18?
Yep.
Not 17? Okay. This very day, the ladies of Persia and Media, who had heard of the queen's behavior, will be telling it to all the king's princes. So contempt and wrath in plenty will arise. If it pleases the king, let a royal command go forth from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and Medes, so that it may not be changed, that Vashti is to come no more before King Xerxes,
yeah.
and let the king give his royal position to another who is better than she. So when the king's decree is made and proclaimed throughout all the kingdom, extensive as it is, all wives will honor to their husbands high and low. This advice pleased the king and the princess, and the king did what Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to each in its own script, to every person in its own language, saying that every man should rule in his own house and speak there in the language of his own people.
Right. So the king was upset because the queen wouldn't come before him and parade in front of all these people that he had there. Xerxes made rash, half-drunk decisions based purely on feelings. His self-restraint and practical wisdom were weakened by too much wine, which was his own degree. And poor decisions are made when people don't think clearly. We need to base our decisions on careful thinking, not on the emotions of the moment. Impulsive decision-making leads to severe complications. In ancient Greek, the documents call Xerxes' wife Amestris, which is probably a Greek form of Vashti. Vashti was disposed in 483 or 482 BC, but she is mentioned again in the ancient records as the queen mother during the reign of her son, and I'm going to butcher this name, but it's Artaxerxes, who succeeded Xerxes toward the end of Xerxes' reign. either Esther died or Vashti was able, through her son, to regain some of the influence that she lost. So the king banished Vashti in whatever form that was, and, made sure that she wasn't around. And a lot of people think that Vashti was pregnant with her soon-to-be son, who was born in 483. And so that was they believe that was part of the reason why she didn't want to be seen in that state in front of those gentlemen. But whatever the reason, her action was a breach of protocol that placed Xerxes in a difficult situation, didn't it? Once he made that command, as a Persian king, if we remember, whatever the king spoke was law, because they thought of him as God. So whatever law he made, that's what would be put into place. And he couldn't revoke those laws, even however bad it would be further down the line. The only thing he could do would be to create another law that would cancel out the one he did before. So whatever the king said, regardless how rash, that instantly became law. Think about that, right? If he was having a bad day and just decided to say something, that was it. I mean, that was the final word. He did have those advisors, and we have to remember that other Persian kings had advisors they used for wisdom, and Daniel was such an advisor under Darius and Cyrus, if you go back to Daniel.
Well, then if he banished her from the kingdom then, right?
Right.
So if you're married to a king, you're just kind of like walking on eggs. You never know when you're going to be.
You're in the Old Testament times, you were property, and even in New Testament times, that's the women's role was not great in those times. And I'm sorry, ladies that are here, but it was very, very poor for women to not listen to their husbands and so forth.
Well, it says the man of the house.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, sometimes they took it to extreme, but we have to remember too that they often played a more powerful role, even though they might not have been respected in society. They usually often, like they do today, you guys make the decisions and make us think that it's our thinking. Right.
So did they actually get married back then?
It would have been kind of like a marriage ceremony, but you got to remember he had a harem. So he probably had 100, 200, 300, however many women it was. So he didn't spend a lot of time with each woman. But what we find is that anyone who had a harem, including some regular biblical characters, because there were so many offspring, it usually caused problems down the road. And it did in the case of David and Solomon and so forth. They had all their concubines and stuff, and eventually they ended up taking over what they shouldn't have. So it does cause problems, but that was the purpose of them, so they could have offspring to carry on their legacy. What's interesting though is he didn't show any respect for his queen. And it will come back to bite him later, but go ahead.
Question. I know we've only read one chapter.
Yeah.
Did they not believe in God at this point?
Who? The Jews?
The king and everything?
They were Persian. They had many gods. They were like the Greeks and the Romans.
So the Ten Commandments had no effect on them?
No. They didn't follow anything the Jewish
they're
people
breaking
did.
them one at a
Yeah,
time, I just wondered.
they didn't follow any of the Jewish laws, any of the religions, and that's why you'll see Mordecai later. He gets in trouble because he won't bow down to the king's official. The king says, I'm better than you. You have to bow before me. And he said, I won't, because I serve only one God and you're not a God. And that's what caused all the problems. The Jewish people, for the most part, still continue to follow their ways. But they got really used to their freedoms they had. So they wandered away from God a lot. So they weren't as strict as they were when they lived in Jerusalem with some of the things that they did. But they still did have that sense of this is what we do, this is what we follow. And you see that in Daniel. You see how he would refuse what the king did, and he would only eat a certain diet. He would pray even though the king told him he wasn't allowed to. So there is that resistance to the surrounding culture. It's hard to picture that because we're used to always having just one God. But you got to remember that everybody around them and the Christians, they worship sticks and rocks and whatever they thought they worshipped, which was part of the issue. So the first question that we have, it says, try to imagine yourself at this banquet. What would you be experiencing? The sights, the sounds, the smells, etc. What do you think?
I assume
I'd be
everything would be
experiencing
elegant,
all the food.
All the food.
but it would be decorated elegantly, and they probably had gold.
Yeah, well, they mentioned the gold and the marble and
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Everything was decorated.
And you got to remember, like, purple at that time was a royal color. And a lot of times the purple came from the inside of shells. Like you see on the beach, see how that purple is? They would grind that up and make the dye. And it cost a lot of money to harvest those. So only rich people could have purple. That's why it was always thought to be a color of royalty. I think I would have been amazed by how hammered everybody probably was. Because if they were allowed to drink all they wanted, I mean, I can only imagine for 180 days drinking crazy amounts of alcohol.
Thinking what a mess it was going to be for 180 days of a party. It's
Yeah.
gonna be pretty
I'm
lovely.
also trying to envision, is this like what do I want to say? Like a big grassy area?
No, it would have been in the palace.
I know it's within the palace, but you're talking a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, the
So,
palace itself was in a semi-arid desert,
yeah,
basically.
okay.
And there may have been, palm trees and stuff and oases here and there, but
Yeah.
it wasn't what we expect as like a normal grassy area, because the Middle East is pretty well.
I forgot. We're not in Northeastern.
No, we're not. We're in the Middle East.
Do they say how many people were there?
It doesn't. I don't have any record. I don't imagine anybody went around and counted them. But it would have been a big showy thing. They would have had musicians. They would have had people doing different acts and stuff.
But just think about the bringing in of and preparing of the food and the wine and the cleanup.
No, it's just
And then the gross things, the clothing,
Yeah.
the sewage,
For 180
for 180 days.
180 days. Yeah.
that's
They
right.
probably left it after
Then there's
180 days.
people helping people helping
People.
people helping people helping people.
Or massive servants.
Well, it's like, where did they take a shower and wash their
They
clothes?
didn't in the river.
Well, they didn't in those
In the
days.
rivers, they would occasionally go into one.
Once
You want to drink the water upstream.
But just think, you have 180 days of no one bathing and everyone. There's no deodorant and stuff. So
They're drinking, they
think-
probably didn't care.
I think about that. But describe the various people that we encounter in this first chapter. Does anyone want to take a stab at who we encounter?
We've got a lot of royalty.
Okay,
all the princes and,
princes.
yeah.
Okay,
And then so there's the people that aren't mentioned, all the servants and people that are
Well,
catering
would that
these
be the
people.
nobles? Who are the nobles?
they would have been the people underneath the king. Some of the eunuchs. Some of the eunuchs served in positions of power as well. We see Xerxes, right? We see the queen Vashti and all those gentlemen who we can't pronounce their names.
And then the
Eunuchs.
next bunch of gentlemen.
Yep. So we see all those people.
No women.
Just the queen.
Just the queen. Yeah.
Where's his harem?
They
Aren't
don't-
they there?
No, well, they don't talk about it. They probably were there somewhere, but
180 days.
Wow.
They were there.
the women, his harem, they don't specifically say where they were. But
Well, were they only his women?
Oh, yeah.
They weren't for others?
no, they were only his. It's kind of funny because they would trade them like cattle, like sheep. Like you would get as many as you could, and if you wanted to give some to another king to stop from attack, you'd give them however many women and livestock and gold, and it's just a whole different way of thinking. So why would be a big reason to give this celebration?
Well, you said it was before they went off to war.
Okay, they went off. It was mainly because he wanted to plan for the next war. But what would be the reason
Display
for
their
that?
wealth.
To display his wealth. to show his power, to show that he had control over everything, including the enormity of this party, like you said, with all the moving pieces and all that stuff. I can't imagine the cost to put something like that on. It would be quite expensive.
So where did he get his money from? From the taxes people paid?
No, he got it from attacking other countries and taking them over and taking their goods. And that's mainly how the Persians, the Babylonians, and those people got their wealth, was attacking other countries. And even the nation of Israel got a lot of their wealth from that as well. When they came into the Promised Land, they wiped out however many different places, and they didn't keep, well, they were instructed not to keep their wealth. Some of the kings did, but they were blessed then after they defeated the people, and the people would give them goods and stuff. So what might be the reason why Xerxes asked the queen Vashti to come to him?
Show his power. To
Okay.
command her to come to,
Okay.
come into his presence.
He wanted to show her off to the other people
Okay.
and show that he had control over her.
A little bit, yeah. I forget where it says. Let's see, where does it exactly say? It says to bring the queen to him with royal crown on her head. He wanted the nobles and all the other men to gaze on her beauty, for she was a very beautiful woman. So he was trying to brag about his queen. Hey, my queen is more beautiful than yours. And she wasn't going to have any of that.
Well, maybe that's why he wanted to display her and make her walk around. If she was pregnant, then he would, I've got an offspring now that's going to be
My heir.
heir.
That could be
Maybe
too.
That's why he wanted her to,
True.
if she was pregnant, maybe that's why he wanted her to.
It doesn't tell you if he summoned her on day 1 or day 179.
No, it doesn't. Or any time in between there.
Yeah.
So the king's request places Vashti in a difficult position. What factors would she have been weighing in her decision? It says, look at verse 12.
I don't know, but you have to remember in verse 9, she's giving the women a party too. So, see, the women are partying
Yeah.
along with the men.
So what would be her decision? What factors would have been she weighing in her decision?
If she was pregnant, I guess.
Well, what's verse 12 say?
Actually, it said he summoned her on the 7th day on verse 10.
There you go.
So,
She refused to come.
Okay.
brought by his eunuchs.
This made the king furious, and he burned with anger. But what do you think she was thinking in her head? Why would she want to refuse that?
But she didn't like him controlling her. I don't know.
Okay, that could be a reason. Maybe she didn't want to be an object, right? We don't.
She wanted to be respected.
She wanted to be respected. We didn't know. We have no idea why she refused. But there probably were a lot of factors she was weighing in, like if I go in front of these people, could something happen to me? Could one of these people take advantage of me? Could I be traded to somebody? Could I be sold? So there was probably a lot of things that she was trying to figure out, well, this might not be such a good idea.
So he doesn't actually ask her himself.
No, he sends his people, and that was pretty typical of what kings would do. They would send someone to their harem to go or to somewhere else and summon people. He wouldn't actually go. So question 6 asks us, what can we observe about King Xerxes' character so far?
He was definitely the boss.
He was the boss, okay?
Power.
Is power hungry?
Yeah.
And he liked to show off his power.
He liked to show off. Okay, what else? He's a drunk, right?
Apparently they all were.
He has anger, rage,
He
right?
wants everything his way.
He wants that's because everybody thought he was God. So you could probably see why that would happen. So that's some good descriptions about him. He's pretty bad person. He's not real good. Think of a time when you were asked to do something you were uncomfortable doing. How did you feel about it? First, maybe share the time if you can, or just say, when that occurred, I felt this way. Anyone want to take a stab at that? Nobody's been ever uncomfortable in any situation.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Sometimes. But the things that are coming to my head, I don't want to talk about.
Okay.
You know? Your first time maybe out with somebody and they want to do something that you don't want to do.
Okay, so that would make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, very uncomfortable. I can see her.
Felt embarrassed.
Embarrassed, okay. Anyone else?
Don't like it when people try to control you.
You don't like it when people try to control you? Okay.
Yeah, you get angry and
Get angry, get upset, right?
Yep.
You sometimes
You
get
don't
this,
feel as
you get
good
those
about
butterflies
yourself.
in your stomachs. Like you're like, oh, okay, I don't really want to do this, but to make you happy, maybe I will. You know, there have been a lot of times in my life when I was very uncomfortable about what I was doing, but I did it. One of the ones that I can think of, and you guys will chuckle about this or think I'm really weird, but either way, I was dared to go after a football game that we had won to dress up in a dress and go with other guys who had dressed up in dresses and weird outfits and go down to the store and purchase beef jerky. They called it the Kipper Run. So it became a tradition after football games. I only did it once, but I was dared to do it. And I was dared, and I was uncomfortable to do it, but I was dared because the cheerleader said, well, I want you to wear my dress, and if you do, then I'll make out with you. So, of course, being a teenage boy, I did it.
Well, that was incentive.
But
Well, I was gonna say.
but going into a store in a dress was really weird, okay?
Well, could you fit into her dress?
I did, obviously, yes.
Then you were,
I wasn't as big as I am today. So, yes, I did fit into the dress. And it was funny because they said that same thing. They said, we don't know how you got in that. But I did it. I didn't feel good about it. You know, I felt embarrassed and ashamed. And I never did it after that. So it was my own lesson. But after I had come to Christ as my Savior, a lot of things changed. Like, people would ask me to go party with them or go drink with them, and I would say, well, I don't do that anymore. And I wouldn't feel ashamed about doing those kind of things. And just recently with my kids, I was told that I had to stop being a pastor so I could have a relationship with them. And I said, well, that's not going to happen.
Wait.
Yeah, I was. Just
You had to stop being a pastor.
yeah, that's what
so
they're
you could have a relationship
with
your
my kids.
kids.
That's what their therapist said, and I laughed at them. But those are the kind of things that you have to think about. If you were asked to do something you didn't want to, are you able to stand up to those people? Can you say no to them? Or will you just go along with it like I did because you might get a better reward? And those are the things that we as Christians have to think about is are we willing to stand up for Christ when nobody else will?
see, I think when you're younger, like I was always very shy, wouldn't say anything. But then as I got older and the things I went through, and then I don't mind saying
No,
yeah.
right? But that's what you have to think about is would you be able to stand up for Christ when you were told not to? And that's the big thing with Esther is she stood up, later we'll see, against the things that were wrong even though she wasn't supposed to. So question 8, why did the wise men perceive the queen's refusal to be dangerous to the kingdom?
Well,
They
because
probably
he's,
knew his temper.
all
Lose
powerful,
temper.
and she went against
Okay, he was all powerful and against them, but why else?
She set a bad example.
She set a bad example. So if the queen wasn't willing to listen to the king, how much more would other women in the kingdom not listen to their husbands? That's what the main thing was. That's why it was dangerous. That's why the other advisors said, well, this can't continue because if it continues, other people are going to say, well, I don't have to listen to my husband. And so then all of society would unravel according to them because you would have all these unruly women running around.
Yeah,
Then his whole harem would be.
The whole harem would go crazy, right?
Wow, it's a good thing he stood his ground, because things would be different today.
Things would be different today. I knew that was coming. So how does each of the main characters in this chapter, Xerxes, Vashti, and the wise men, view gaining and maintaining respect? So how does King Xerxes view gaining and maintaining respect?
He sent out a proclamation to all of the families.
Okay, so he made it law,
Yeah.
right? He does it with power.
Yep.
Okay. What about Vashti? What about the queen? How did she view gaining and maintaining respect?
Well, she didn't. She was banned from the kingdom, wasn't she?
Yeah, but
But she didn't show up.
she didn't show up.
Go against his word.
She went against his will. So by her defiance, it was her maintaining her own respect for herself and for the position she was in. So what about the wise men? Pleading and agreeing with the king, right? We have to do this because this is you're God, you're our king. It has to be made a royal decree. We can't have these unruly women running around. You have to do something about it. Think about the kingdom, right? So they're whining and throwing themselves before the king because he was almighty and powerful, right? That's kind of interesting to think about that. So how does respect actually develop between people? Not in the story here, but between us, between other people in the world. How do we develop respect between one another?
One respects the other and then vice versa.
Okay, so mutual respect.
If you have a friendship and you do what you say you're going to do, and that's also mutual.
Well, you have to be trustworthy,
Yes,
right?
trustworthy.
But how does that occur? Does it happen all at once?
No,
No? Okay, how does it happen?
over time.
Over time, right? So it takes a little time to build those relationships.
Right.
It takes some time for people to get used to people.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure when I came on board, you guys were probably like, well, who's this wild card they're bringing in here, right? And so but it took a little while for you guys to get trust in me, right? It wasn't something that happened instantly, you know? And that's how we have to work as people to gain that trust with others is over time, through our relationships, through our actions, what we say, what we do. We can't say one thing and then go and do something else. And that's a big problem that a lot of people have with church today and people of the church is that they say one thing and they're living a completely different life.
Or politicians.
Politicians are crooked regardless. There's not a lot of good ones out there. But we have to make sure we're practicing what we're preaching. And if we're not, people are going to notice. They are going to say, well, you're a hypocrite because you're not doing what the Bible says. You're not, you go to church on Sunday, sure, but you're in the bar Monday drinking. Or, we saw you at House of Ill Refute, or whatever you want to call it, Or we saw you yelling at someone the other day and didn't have your anger under control and you're not living in harmony and peace with other people. So we really have to watch what we do because we have to make sure that we are guarding ourselves and our hearts and that we actually live the way that we are supposed to. And that builds the trust because when people see that what you do is what you're talking about, then they can trust you. And if people see us living as Christians the way we're supposed to, then they can start to trust the church and trust the people in the church and say, you know what, these people are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. And maybe it's a place where I can find, myself and be loved and taken care of. And that's huge, right? I mean, it's huge to earn someone's respect and trust. So what are some ways that you have been trying to gain respect that are not godly or helpful?
Well, I know the other day I worked at Pete Berzonis' funeral dinner, and quite a few of the people were talking about the playground and the help that they had received from the church. And the girl said, "Do you belong to that church?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, that was just out of the world to think that that money was given toward that." And there was quite a few of them talking all about it. So
Okay.
it was getting around that it was.
Okay, so that's the good way to do it. But how do we gain respect by not being godly or helpful? How do we gain respect by not being godly or helpful?
I don't think you
Threat.
do.
Threaten, right? How do mob bosses do it, right?
Yeah.
In the movies, you see them whack somebody.
Yeah.
You see them do something underhandedly, and they do it through power, through coercion, through whatever force they need. Those are kind of the ungodly and unhelpful ways of doing things, because basically what they're doing is forcing someone to like you even though they can't stand you. You'll see it in abusive relationships, where the man will continually beat the woman or vice versa, depending on what happens, and they will try to keep the respect of their other by beating them, which makes no sense at all, right? And so we have to watch that we're not trying to get respect through those bad methods, like King Xerxes was. Like, well, I'm king, I'm going to do what I want, and the heck with the rest of you people. If I don't like you, you're gone, you know? And so we got to make sure we're not doing that. So describe one thing that you can do this week to show someone respect. No one's going to show any respect to anyone.
Open the door for someone.
Open the door for someone.
Someone who's handicapped. A lot of people say that have handicapped children, that the people pay no attention to them, or they, talk about them badly and that type of thing.
I saw a thing on Facebook the other day. It said, how do you treat handicapped people? Like regular people. You don't treat them differently. You treat them like regular people, right? And that's like things we could do. Like if we know there's someone struggling maybe to get to their car with the groceries, put them in their car for them, or ask first, because sometimes if you don't ask, they think you're trying to take their groceries. So ask first, open the door for people coming into restaurants. Let the ladies go first. I know, Gary, that's hard for you. You can't let a lady go first, right? But do those little things to earn that respect. And I'm the only one that can say this, is respect your elders, because I'm the youngest guy here. So I have to respect you guys because you guys are all older than me. And you've been through more life than I have, even though I've been through quite a bit. So I have to earn your guys' respect by what I do too. Like, I couldn't come here every day and start screaming and throwing furniture around and expect you guys to like me, right? That would probably be the wrong way to go about getting respect. And we need to work on that, because if people respect us and trust us, they'll be more willing to come and be part of Christ's family. And as much as it sounds weird, Esther is a great book for that, because she gained respect from Xerxes by her own actions, by her uncle's actions. And their actions held more power than what the king was saying at the time, because he realized later on that, he was wrong in some of the things that he was doing. And that goes a long way, doesn't it? Right? So I want you guys to think at home. You don't have to mention it out loud here. But journal about some of the times that you have disrespected people in your life. Pray through each one of those experiences and ask God for forgiveness. And if needed, write a note to those people asking for forgiveness. I think that's one of the biggest things that I did when I first came to know Christ, is I knew almost everyone that I had wronged in my life, and I had tried to apologize to the majority of them if I could contact them. There was one gentleman that I picked on quite a bit in high school, and I couldn't because he had killed himself. And to this day, I feel horrible about it. So try to mend those fences. Mend those relationships where you have broken something or someone, and try to show them that you're sorry for doing that. And that takes true courage if you can go out of your way to mend a relationship that you don't have. And I just did this last night. I asked if I could talk to my kids because I hadn't seen them since June, and they talked to me last night, and I bit the bullet and said, okay, what's going on, guys? And talked to them, and they are going to come see me on the weekend of the 18th. So, they said, well, why didn't you call? And I said, well, because you said you didn't want to be here anymore, and I was respecting that. And you could tell that they missed me, honestly. So that's good. And that's an example of if you can mend that relationship, it moves more mountains than if you try to hold that grudge against someone, especially like in my case from my dad. He was very abusive when I was younger. And I mended my ways with him and got over that, and I forgave him for what he did. And he's not like that anymore. Completely different person. So you never know how people are going to be after a situation happens. But if you're willing to ask for forgiveness or ask, to try to make amends, things will go better for you rather than forcing people to respect you. Questions, comments, any of you guys have that you want to bring up, you want to talk about? Anything that's burning in your mind right now?
What if the person doesn't know that you felt ill-willed about them? Do you still contact them?
I would say, yeah. I would say, I would contact them and say, okay, at some point this is what happened, and I feel this way about it, and I just want to make sure that we're going to be on speaking terms, or we're going to be, we'll be okay. Like, you may not understand it, but can you forgive me for what I did or what you did, or, you have to try to figure out a way to phrase that. Okay, it's difficult.
What if you've already done it, and what I want to say, the person. Well, I hadn't spoken to this person for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't communicate.
Mm-hmm.
I did through her son to see how she was and everything. But then when she came to Jack's funeral, we talked. But we haven't talked since. So
Send her a card.
Every time, I was always the one that made the gesture.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was always me that made the gesture.
Okay.
And she finally came up, but it was after he passed away. I wanted her to come up before,
right.
but she wouldn't. She came up after he passed away, which was...
Well, unfortunately that might have been wrong timing, but again, you're trying. So you tried to mend that fence. And if you don't know a way to do it, send her a card and say, hey, I was thinking about you. God put me on your mind, and I can't get over what I'm thinking. And can we go to lunch and just talk, or can we just meet and play a game or something, or go to an event or something, because I feel that I need to talk to you, or I need to see what I can do to try to work this out. Those are the kind of things that are hard to do, because it does take a different kind of person to want to admit that maybe it was my own fault. Maybe it was their fault, but it doesn't matter, because you would rather move ahead and still have them as a friend or whatever. Because
it's hard for me because I've done it so many times,
right.
and she's never reciprocated.
And that happens sometimes too. But remember that Christ told us that we are to forgive and forgive and forgive 7 times 70 times 770 times.
But you're supposed to forgive, but you don't have to forget.
You don't have to forget, but you're not supposed to hold that grudge against them. Okay, if they've done something seriously wrong with you, like abuse or neglect or something along those lines, those are times where you can forgive them, but not necessarily trust them. Okay, you have to make sure that you're safe first. Like, if your spouse is beating you, you don't say, well, okay, I'm sorry, and I know you're sorry, and then continue to be in that situation. You have to get yourself in a safer place. So make sure that you take care of yourself, but just don't be mean about it. don't be like, well, I'm the one that's been trying to get you to apologize, and it's the wrong way to go about things.
Well, I don't want her to apologize, I just wanna get together.
Well, good. Send her a card and say, hey, look, it's just troubling me. I want to be your friend again. I want to know what's going on.
I think I'd ask her, is there a reason why you don't want to?
Yeah. Just
Oh, I know the reason.
well, just continue to work at it. That's the best you can do. And by you doing that, though, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, even if they're not.
And you feel good about that.
And that will eventually show in the long run that you're trying to build your character and live the way you say you are, even if the other person won't reciprocate it.
I think it's important to remember that forgiveness is just as much for you as it is for them.
Yep.
Too.
And are there any other?
When you let go of that guilt and blame, it also eases yourself.
Any other questions or things you would like me to look into before our next class?
I just dropped that.
No? Okay, remember it's the 8th, I believe, that we will not have it, but it will be the 15th that we will have class again here at 6. We will be doing chapter 2, so read up on chapter 2. Take time and look over it. I'm going to ask someone else to pray to close us out tonight. So, Norma, would you like to pray and close out the Bible study for us?
I'll try. Thank you, Lord, for letting us be here tonight and have this close meeting with all of our folks and be able to study your Bible to learn more and more about it and what each one of us need. I thank you, Lord, for all the things that you do for us each and every day. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Wonderful.
Yes.